What we're going to talk about now is how to layer up your projects or how to layer up your quilts, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways. There's a couple of things that you need to remember before you start, and that is measure your quilt or your project through the centre, and you're going to measure it through the centre horizontally and you're going to measure it through the centre vertically. Those measurements are what you're going to use to purchase your wadding and your backing fabric. Now, the rule of thumb is that your backing fabric and your wadding should be 2 to 3 inches larger than your actual quilt project. If you're using a long arm facility, and that is a completely different machine and sending it away to be professionally quilted, you will definitely need to have 3 inches larger. Now, I mean 3 inches all the way around. So if, for example, your quilt is 60 inches by 60 inches, your backing and your wadding need to be 66 inches, and that's allowing 3 inches either side. So I'm now talking about layering up the quilt. This is my backing fabric and this is the reverse of the fabric. This is the right side of the fabric. So what you do is you pop your right side of your fabric down onto your table, and so the reverse of the fabric is facing you. You then place your wadding, and I'm using the ECO150 wadding in this particular instance, and the wadding and the backing are the same size. The quilt is then laid on the top. You can see, if anybody's wondering, I'm using the quick screen square in this quilt, which is why it has this on it. You're going to place the quilt so the wrong side of the quilt is onto the wadding and the right side of the quilt is facing you. And you can see here I've got approximately 2 inches larger all the way around, and that's because this is quite a small quilt. The reason that you have to have the wadding and the backing slightly larger is as you're quilting, there may be some movement and the quilt top may move, and basically it's not going to fall off the edge of the backing and the wadding. So the first option that you have for layering up is to use safety pins. Now, I prefer to use the curved safety pins, and these are quilting pins, and so therefore they will not allow too much movement between the actual pin when it's closed. I personally prefer to always baste, which is an alternative word for keeping your 3 layers together, pin baste in vertical lines, so I have a grid system. Remember that when you're starting to quilt, the rule of thumb is that you start to quilt in the centre. And if you have thought about your quilting design, then what you want to try and do is avoid putting the pins exactly where your quilting design is going to be. So my first set of pins are going to be in this line here. Now, just a little handy tip, when you finish with your safety pins, don't close them when you pop them back in your box, because you've just got to open them again. Now, you must ensure that the back of the quilt, so that's your backing fabric, is kept flat at all times. And all I'm going to do is pop the pin through and leave it, and then I'm going to bring it down. My intention here is to quilt in the centre of this particular block, and so therefore I can easily pin along this line. I like to do my basting or my pin basting approximately 4 inches apart. Just pop your hand underneath and pop your pins in, and you're just going to continue doing that until you are you've completely covered your quilt. And in my opinion, more pins are better than less pins. Now, the beauty about pins is you carry on putting them in your grid. If you do find as you're quilting you have a little pucker because you need to regularly check the back, you can easily remove that pin and move it to another position. After I've finished quilting that area, I again like to take the pins out, and it's quite satisfying because you can then see how much you've actually quilted. The second option for basting or tacking or keeping those 3 layers together is to use a needle and thread. This is a great way to use up all of those small pieces of thread that you have left over on your bobbins that aren't sufficient for a project. What you'll do is you will just literally pop a knot in one end of your thread, and you are going to tack. Now, you don't want to do small tacking stitches, so we'll do nice big tacking stitches and use a contrast thread because you will be able to see where those stitches are. You want to tack in a grid, and I know I'm a little bit awkward here just for the purposes of the camera, and just do those nice large stitches. Now there's fors and against, and I'll talk about those later on. So can you see nice big stitches all the way through, and just keep stitching in that grid. And when I talk about a grid, do some vertical lines about 4 inches apart, go all the way horizontally and then vertically. Another way of layering up or basting your quilt, which is just holding those 3 layers together, is to use a fabric spray. Now there are several on the market, so just pop into your local quilt store and they will be able to advise you. Couple of little rules. Make sure that you are in a well ventilated area. If you do have any animals or small children, possibly make sure that they're out of the room. And the other thing is to use the spray sparingly and always spray the wadding. You don't need a lot. It's a temporary basting spray. It's repositionable. So what you do is you lie it down. I would normally do it the other way around. Make sure it's nice and smooth. And then simply, and can you see how a small amount I use there? Pop it down and spray it. And you would do that all over your quilt. In conclusion, I've shown you 3 different ways to baste or tack or secure those 3 layers together. And the thing you have to remember is what size is the project that you are working with. Now this is my opinion, but I do think for using the spray, anything up to a small quilt, cushions, wall hangings, possibly a single bed is the maximum size that I would use the spray for. The tacking, it's a bit like Marmite in so much as I personally don't like to tack, because if my quilt moves, I've got to remove the tacking stitches and do those again. And so therefore the larger projects, I personally prefer to use safety pins because they are so quick and so easy to remove and easy to reposition. Obviously it's your choice, and I would suggest that you try all 3 different ways and then make your own decisions. As you can see, Vlieseline has a wide range of products, each with different properties and benefits for your projects. You can view the whole range on the Vlieseline website, where you can download the brochure, which has detailed information on all of the products across our 4 categories. You can also join the conversation with us on our Facebook page, Creative Community Group and Instagram. All of the details are below.